About a month ago, I decided to enter a fiction writing contest because I wrote this story about 6 years ago. Well, it's longer than that now. And got about 25,000 words in, and the story got so complicated I couldn't wrap my head around it anymore, so I dropped it. And then this contest comes up where they're saying, all we want is your first 5,000 words. And I'm going, 5,000 words I can wrap my head around. And Ash says to me, you're now in devotion around this. And I thought, oh, am I? Is that right? What is devotion? What does it look like? How does it feel? What goes on? Devotion is such a powerful word. And so I started looking at that in terms of my writing, at being devoted to it in that kind of way. The submission is due tomorrow. So I have spent this last month really working this thing, devoted to it. And in being devoted to it, I noticed several things. I noticed that it was frustrating as hell. That I couldn't always get the words out the way I wanted them. And then when I got feedback, people said, I don't understand what you wrote at all. And this story doesn't make any sense. And I knew it made sense in here, but it was getting it out on the page. And then I'd get it out on the page, and then I'd get feedback like, this sounds generic. Anybody could have written this. Where's your voice? I got feedback around the other book I worked on. Where's your voice? And so I learned something I hadn't ever really thought about before, which is, where's my voice? And then I learned, okay, now you're speaking in your voice, but you're using generic terms. You're not telling anymore, you're now showing. But in showing, you're using generic terms to show where's your voice. Where's your originality here? And so writing it over and over and over, and I thought, wow, this really is devotion. Once you get into like your 100th edit, it feels very much like devotion. We have a couple in our community that is so devoted to their family that they are an inspiration to me and others. That they are so focused and devoted that it brings out something that touches the rest of us, touches anybody who knows how devoted they are to their family, what that means to them. I've had a devotion since my 20s. It's been to my death. Now that sounds strange, I'm sure. But what it's meant is I set a North Star. Something came to me in my 20s that said the most important thing is that when I'm lying on my deathbed, I'm happy with how I lived my life. I am satisfied with how that happened. And that has shaped my life in so many ways, in every way. Because now it isn't like there haven't been times in my life where I have forgotten that devotion, where I have drifted from it. But no matter how far I've drifted, there came a time that went, wait a minute, what am I making important here? How am I going to feel about what I'm doing now at the end of my days? Am I going to be happy with how I spent this time now? And so it became this North Star, and I have been absolutely, and still am to this day, devoted to it. And it's now 3 years ago, I was in the hospital, many of you have heard this already, and be told that this is your last day. You are not seeing tomorrow. This is it for you. Do what you got to do because you are not seeing tomorrow. And in that moment, I felt satisfied. It was one of the coolest moments of my life. Now I know that may sound strange. What do you mean? You were just told you're going to die and that was one of the coolest moments? Yes, because I had been living for the past 50 years by a tenet of being satisfied with how I lived my life when that moment came, and there I was in that moment, and I was happy with how I lived my life. And that was so satisfying. And then I didn't die, which meant I had to keep doing it. So today I'm asking you to look at what is your devotion? What are you devoted to? Where is your North Star that keeps you focused on what matters to you most? What is your devotion? There are many ways to be devoted, and there are many different paths to what we're devoted to. Here's a story about a monk. I love telling stories about monks. Who wakes up one day to find that the monastery he was running is in flames, that the whole place is on fire, way beyond saving it. So he goes outside and he's just watching it burn. The village people, they're like, oh my God, we got to save the sutras, and we got to save the statues. And then they look at this monk who's just standing there doing nothing and look at him and go, why aren't you helping? And he goes, because anything I'm devoted to isn't in there. It's here. What we're ultimately devoted to is here. It's not out there. But then we can take our devotions and we can turn them into something that they're really not and still think it's so. There's another story about a woman who was very devoted towards Buddha and Buddhism, so had this statue and burnt incense in front of the statue every day. And then she thought, some of the smoke isn't going towards my statue, it's going towards other people's. And so I'm going to build a tube around it to make sure the smoke goes towards my statue. And in doing so, what happened over time is the statue blackened from soot. Because we can do that in our lives. We can take possession of our devotion in a way that actually turns it into something less than what it originally felt like in here. I have this other devotion. I have this other thing I in the past have called a devotion. Let me put it that way. It's called, I am devoted to the truth. And I am. It's really true. I am absolutely devoted to the truth. But here's what happened with that. I noticed that became so strong in me that my need to know became a compulsion. And that compulsion I would then act out on when I was sure that other people were not telling the truth. And in doing so, hurt them, hurt me. And this went on since I'm 6. And so we're talking a really long time before it finally came to me. Oh my God, I keep saying this, and it isn't like it didn't help me at all. Right? I mean, it kept me out of trouble. I'm able to recognize when things aren't true, when something's off. I feel the slightest little bit of unalignment. I mean, my attunement to what is really true and what's going on and what isn't is flawless. But my execution and how I am with it is compulsive. And in doing so, it doesn't make it a devotion. So take a look for yourself at those things that maybe you hold near and dear, that maybe you even call devotions, but maybe aren't. Maybe there's something else. Maybe you have compulsions. Maybe you don't. I don't know. But you do. You know, I remembered yesterday, I was thinking over my life, and I was remembering back in my 20s when I had a band that was doing really well. We were getting gigs, we were playing, we were traveling, we were signed. We were starting to get some traction. And I noticed that I wasn't actually devoted to that. I was sitting at dinner. I remember this specifically. We're having Mexican food. I'm sitting there at dinner, and everybody's like going crazy over how successful the gig we just played was and what's coming up next and how things are going. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking to myself, what does any of this have to do with awakening? What does any of this have to do with enlightenment? What am I really focused on here? And so I've noticed that that's been a real North Star of mine since really early on in life. There I was, sitting in what was building into something successful. And me sitting there going, I don't want to make this important. I don't want to make this my North Star that I'm successful at this. And ultimately wasn't. Ultimately, the band broke up, like many bands do. I had another band after that. Because I love playing music. I was always devoted to the music, but only in how it touched me and enriched me. I want you to look at your lives and how they are touching you and enriching you. Because that's worth being devoted to. Some of the things we make important, I'll tell you what, you know what's great about being on your deathbed? You get so darn clear about what's important and what isn't. Or somebody you love on their deathbed. Or just sick enough where it could really, bring that up in you. And all of a sudden, I have watched people throughout the years, including myself, make things important and watch that importance shift so quickly, just when something else comes along that's a higher priority. I remember thinking, I read this story once about this small town in the U.S. And there was this huge argument in this small town about what flowers to plant around City Hall. And I was thinking, how good life must be that that's your biggest problem in this town. And so when we look at our lives, at what level are we looking? Right? There's this place in which we go, this one thing is important. But then you pull the lens back and you go, well, wait a minute. In the scope of it, in the scope of what really matters and cares for me, what am I devoted to? What actually matters here? And so that's been a major question in my life. And this week, I noticed practice, the practice itself, not the result of the practice, but that my devotion to just doing the practice, whatever happened with it, really mattered to me. How deep I was in the practice, not what came of it. We are a teaching of manifestation. And that's good. That's really good. Because you want your life to feel better. You want to have a high quality of life. You want the agency to know that you actually have say. You want that. I want that. I feel that. And now that I feel that kind of agency, now that I feel that kind of power, that I get to create my life the way I want, I notice that I don't care. I notice that there's something richer going on here. There's something powerful beyond anything that I might manifest, that I might create, that we can touch, that has a richness to it. I feel sometimes, whether I'm sad or happy or thrilled or feeling alone, that when I'm in that practice, the practice itself has a richness to it that allows me to experience whatever I'm experiencing on a deeper level. Now, some of you may be sitting there going, I don't want to experience this any more intense than I got it going on. And I can understand that. But I'm here to tell you that there is a richness there that has a healing to it that is deeper than than I could imagine. That there is a richness to life. There is something here that is so worth being devoted to. In and of itself, whatever it brings you, whatever you might experience. I now, as many more moments than ever in my life, whenever anything's going on, remember that's what's going on. And this, whatever it is rich. It's rich in how much it hurts. It's rich in how much it makes me happy. It's rich in how much it angers me. It's rich in how sad I am. There is a richness to this life that comes through a devotion to being in it, to being in these moments, whatever they may bring. I stand in that place. Somebody asked me, what do I know? I have no idea what's going to happen a moment from now, tomorrow, the next day. Many times I can't even make sense of yesterday. But this is what I know, that the more I can be devoted to my practice of being here, right now, with whatever's going on, and naming what's going on and not naming what I think about it or what I ought to do about it or what I interpret about it. It's like that thing that came to me. Some of you were here when I talked about when I was down in Belize and I had that vision that said, the heart knows and then the mind interprets. The more we can be devoted to our heart, knowing that place, that's where the richness is. That's where the beauty is. That's where the love is. The awe, the wonder, the magnificence of what we can have in life. So I ask you this. Where do you return when it's not working? When no one notices? When it costs you something? When it gives nothing back? That is where devotion actually lives. I love you. Thank you.